All right, let's finish this miserable project. Um, so some of you who just might be racist, who are watching this video, might be these two videos, might be thinking, hey, Asian boy, stop reading our white people books and go read your Ching Chong China Bong scrolls or whatever. And just for those racists out there who are watching this, thank you, by the way. And also, your wish is my command, which is why, just for you guys, I'm gonna talk about a Korean book. This is a book called 원미동 사람들, which is Korean, obviously. It translates into the people of Wonmidong. Obviously, if you don't know, that which is not obvious, but Korean. When it comes to Korean, the language Korean, we use some Chinese characters in there. So one means far away, further away, whatever. Mi means beautiful, and dong is usually used to talk about towns or cities, or maybe usually, just like cities and districts and whatnot. So Wonmidong is basically a place called Wonmi. I think the author once said that it's supposed to mean that it's a town that looks beautiful from far away, but when you actually look closely, there's a lot of very authentic and very real problems going on. This really was the first Korean book that got to me on a very strong level, and this really is one of the most critically acclaimed Korean books in Korea. And like this and a book called 내 사랑 사북 is probably like the two Korean books that really got to me as a kid. Mostly because I'm always really fascinated with Korean books that deal with Korea, and mostly like people from the middle class or lower, dealing with their own problems back in the 70s or the 80s. That era of literature really interests me a lot because that was a really terrible time for Korea. Like, obviously, we were like progressing and becoming a better country slowly, at least financially, but politically, it was all over the place. There were militarized police forces killing people and torturing people just because they were trying to get free speech. There was a huge gap between the rich and the poor. The middle class was basically non-existent. Most people were not having a good time, let's just say that. And I don't know, something about this era just reminds me of what my dad got through, or what my mother got through, and why people of the previous generation are the way they are, and how it affects us, like my generation as well, and how very much so, because how the next generation that's going to come after mine, how they're not really going to experience all these problems, all these tumultuous past remnants, because Korea in recent years has gotten really good, financially, I mean, and definitely just overall politically as well. Even though we did have to impeach our last president, but still, we progressed. And also, I love this book because I grew up being poor. Now, our family's okay. We're financially stable. But this book sort of taps into those struggles quite a bit. And so it's basically a collection of short books about people who live in this very small town. And it's not necessarily this big town where everybody has a steady job. No, these people are struggling. They need to get rent. They have no idea what to do next month when it comes to their finances. It's those kinds of very real-life things here. There's nothing dramatic about it. It's just real-life problems that are constantly coming down on them, which also reflects the time that is set in. And there's just something so brutally honest about the whole thing. Like, how are we going to earn money? What will the old man do with the land that he has? Why is he fighting for such a trivial thing? Why do people in general fight for such trivial things? Are we really pushed so far to the corner, to the point where we're sort of losing our humanity? And there's just like these images of men beating a man to just a lot of men beating a certain man to a pulp just because because the guy owes them money. Just these really brutal imagery. And my personal favorite short story in this book is this one story where it's told from the perspective of a little girl. And she basically witnesses something. And it's sort of a story about the destruction of innocence and how we can't really hide our kids from this when reality doesn't allow that. And, it's kind of like seeing your parents fight for the first time. You sort of realize that this is real. That even your parents are not these godly figures. Sometimes they have no idea what to do, and they just kind of crumble down. Well, that's depressing. Anyways, this book is really good. And also, if you're interested, I know it's a trivial thing, but this book was written by a woman. And if you're one of those people who want to support women in any way, shape, or form, go read this. It's great. It's a great book in general. So, just keep in mind. The next 3 books are not Korean, but this book is a Korean copy of a book that was written in German originally. I'm not really sure. I'm sorry. I do not have the English copy right now. So this book is called The Pigeon by Patrick Zuskind. I think it's Zuskind. If I'm wrong, so be it. I know that Perfume is sort of his magnum opus, and I do love Perfume. Perfume's a great book, but I always found The Pigeon to be much more fascinating. Because Perfume is it's got a vast setting. Its ideas are very vast. It's in a way epic, and it ends on a very dramatic point. But this book, it's very claustrophobic. It's got a very claustrophobic viewpoint. There's this constant description of paranoia and very suicidal thoughts, and this sense of drollness that you feel as a person who's just kind of living in the modern world. Very honest depictions of anger issues, and the hopelessness of the ending is just insane to me. The way that the main character eventually kind of succumbs to the idea of not being able to do anything with it. Like, at the end, I'm going to spoil just a little bit of the book, and if you probably need to skip like 30 seconds or whatever. So, starting now. At the end, the main character tries to kill himself. He gets a hotel room, he has his favorite meal for the last time, and he sleeps. And he wakes up the next day, and he's not dead. And outside, he just kind of looks outside, he sighs, and he just goes out and spends his day just like the last day and the day before that. And it's the ending that's basically trying to say, you cannot escape your mundane life because you're too afraid to die, you're too afraid to change anything, you're not going to escape this. It's such a bleak ending that when I was a kid, when I read it, I was just like, you can't do this. You gotta give me some hope. But no, the book is like, that's life. Most people, even though they want to change their lives, they can't do anything because they are not independent enough. They're not, what's the word? Oh god, I hate when this happens. And I don't edit anything, so this is just gonna be in the video. I don't know. Anyways, you can't do anything about your life because we're all losers. That's basically what the book is trying to say. So as a kid, when I read it, it was just such a revolutionary thing to me. I was just so emotionally invested into every single moment of this because it just destroyed me as a kid. Like, all these descriptions of all these very extreme negative emotions. And it feels so personal because it's so closely described within this character. Like, it never gets away from the proximity of the character's viewpoint. It's so much more on the minimal scale. It's so confronting compared to other books about paranoia and whatnot. And the prose and the writing isn't as great as Perfume, I'll admit that, but I don't think it needs to be, because it does its job well. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's another book that I love. I'm really tired right now. I'm not sure why I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing anything? Back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. I do not have the second to last book that I'm going to talk about right now as a tangible form within my hands, because I have lent it to my cousin, and he has not given it back to me, just like Kanye's cousin did not give the laptop back to Kanye. The second book is Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita. And really, this era of English literature sort of fascinates me. It feels like authors weren't afraid to depict the protagonist as a sympathetic person, but also sort of the scum of the earth type of person. And at the same time, they'll bring like social criticism with extreme dark humor. In the way, A Clockwork Orange is another great example. Catch-22 is a very obvious, probably the most famous example. But Lolita's my favorite one, mostly because I feel like Lolita's the darkest one. It's also the most screwed up one, and it's also the funniest one. Like, some of the stuff in that book is genuinely hilarious. There's this one bit where Humpert is driving Dolores in the car, and they're like going across the country, and they drive past this car crash, and there's like a woman's leg hanging out the window. And obviously the woman's dead, and she's wearing a certain shoe. Dolores sees the shoe and says, "Oh, that's the shoe that I want." And, like, that's such a screwed up way of looking at that situation. It's hilarious. It reminds me, and obviously this film came out after the book, but it reminds me of the movie Happiness by Todd Solondz. Because in that movie, there's a point where you actually feel some sympathy for the pedophile. You actually feel sympathy for the murderous woman who chopped up the landlord. In this book, there's a point where you actually are convinced to see Humpert's side of things. Because in many ways, you should be hating this character. Here's a pedophile. A very clear pedophile. Because in the book, the girl's like, what, 11? 13? She's very young. She is not 16. Even then, it's wrong. But when it's 11 to 13, it's just like, that's definitely getting into some real creepy territory. But I don't know, something about Humpert, he fascinates me. He's probably my favorite character in literature, because throughout the book, he continually tries to show his humanity while never admitting his faults. And he's so suave about it. Like, there's just something about it that just fascinates. The hypocrisy that this character is showing. It's hilarious, and at the same time, it's tragic. And the fact that he's in that mind space is sort of sympathetic. But at the same time, you're like, I'm feeling sympathy for a pedophile. That's kind of screwed up. And that's the brilliance of the writing. It's so good. It makes us all into hypocrites and human scum. That's the greatness of the book. And I wish I could write something like that. It's so good. Admittedly, there's one flaw in the book, and it's the fact that the middle portion, the part where they're traveling across America, that part kind of dragged, just a little bit. But even then, all the descriptions of Humpert's mild annoyance with Dolores, or the paranoia that he's experiencing because at any moment now he might get caught by the police or whatever. Like, somebody might know his story or whatever. It's very interesting. The whole thing throughout is very well written. It's hilarious. It's so dark, and like I said, it just transforms you while you're reading it. So yeah, I wish I had that copy. I really love that book. But anyways, time to talk about the last book, which is my favorite book of all time. It might not seem like the greatest book ever, but it's my personal favorite book. It got to me the most, and I feel like at this point in my life, it's much more relevant than ever. And that book is Hermann Hesse's Beneath the Wheel. Now, I'll admit a few things. The message of this book is very obvious. It's not subtle at all. It's very in your face. Most of the time, Hermann Hesse has a tendency of doing that. The writing is not Hesse's best. This is not Damien. Let's just say that. It's not Damien. But this book, at least to me, is so relatable that it hurts. It was relatable to me back when I read it when I was 14. It's much more relatable to me now. Because I realize that I have been living the same trajectory as the character Hans here. So I'm just going to give you a slight summary here. It's about this character Hans, who's sort of this child prodigy from this small village. And he sort of sacrifices his own desires to go to this boarding school. You know, he basically gives up his childhood to studying. And he goes to this boarding school, and he becomes so disenfranchised by the education system that he completely loses all of his strengths in life, all of his energy in life, all of his hopes in life. He falls into a very deep depression. And he tries to make ends meet with a blacksmith job because then his father forces him to do at least something. And of course his father is so disappointed with him that he's not even able to talk with him in a casual way. And one night he gets drunk. I'm going to spoil the ending here because it's very important. He gets drunk. He goes by the lake or the river or whatever, and he reminisces about his little childhood and how he loved fishing, and he accidentally falls into the water and drowns and dies. And that's the end of the book. So minus the dying part, this story arc is basically my life. I was told that I was this child prodigy. I was told to go to all these places. I was disenfranchised by the education system. I fell into a deep depression, and thankfully, so far, I have not died. It really has a stronger resonance now, because back when I read it, I was not disenfranchised yet. And you think that after reading this at 14, that I would have made some better choices. I would have tried to become more independent with my choices in my life. But no, I fed into the education system, got verbally abused by teachers, and like Hans, I'm not able to let go of my former glory. I cannot grab onto actual passions that I have that are right in front of me out of fear and out of regret, and it destroys myself, and it's destroying me every day inside, right here, somewhere, wherever the soul is, if that actually exists. So yeah, the book is very relatable. The book is it's so relatable to the point where it basically predicted my life. How can you not love a book that's like that? Every word of this book is true. And if anybody says, well, it's kind of overly dramatic, man, it's too cliche, I mean, no kid actually goes through this overly dramatic stuff. It's clearly just Hermann Hesse trying to criticize the overly formulaic education system by getting Hans into overly dramatic situations. But I'm here to tell you that this book is very realistic. I am basically Hans, so shut up. The book is great. You should read it. And also other Hermann Hesse stuff. And then just books in general. Just read. Reading is good. Reading makes your brain move and get all squiggly and all that stuff. It's good. Don't just read, Stephen King stuff. Stephen King is good, by the way. I like Stephen King. I don't care what anybody says. Stephen King is fun. I like stories about killer clowns who are actually space demons. That's great. So yeah, those were my 9 favorite. Jane Eyre, Test of the D'Urbervilles, Silas Marner, Box Office Poison, Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl, The People of Wonbidong, The Pigeon, Lolita, and Beneath the Wheel. Put your favorite books in the comment section and all that jazz. Oh god, I'm tired. Bye.